thank you to everyone for coming today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for allowing me. Usually I'm asking if I can be at Rotary with you. This time your program failed you, and I was asked to be a speaker today, so I'm delighted to be with you. If it's any comfort, I made notes of what I want to talk about, and it fits on this card. It reminds me that the first time I ever spoke to a Rotary Club, and I may have said this to you when I've been at your club previously, I was just elected to the House of Representatives, living in Hayes, and the Concordia Rotary Club invited me to be their program. At that time, they met on Fridays at noon, and I traveled from Hayes to Concordia, and the club president met me at the door of the restaurant where Rotary meets, and he poked me in the chest. He said, "Now, Congressman, you need to know our meeting concludes precisely at 1 o'clock. And I thought, well, that's a warm welcome for a fellow Rotarian and for a new member of Congress. I then sat at the head table next to the club president, where I discovered he was the local Methodist minister. And I thought, what a double standard this is. Many of you know me, and I'm not the senator who's very good at humor and rarely tell jokes. The ones that people tell me that I remember are the ones I would not repeat to you, and the others have escaped me. But I remember the story that day of the little boy and his dad, who were in this case, the Methodist church, and they were touring the church, and they were looking at the stained glass windows, and the son asked his dad, "Now, Dad, what are these stars for, the stained glass window?" And the dad explains to his son, "Son, that's for the people who died in the service." The boy says, "That the 8:30 service, the 11 o'clock service?" So I've worked hard at getting even with Reverend Ken Parker, still a Methodist minister, for a long time. But I'm honored to be with you. Thank you. It's been a bit. I was at your Rotary Club a year and a half ago, and you were kind enough to host it as a town hall meeting. We had lots of folks here. I'm happy just to be the program, and you're helping me make up one of my many missed absences from my hometown club. We have moved from Hayes to Manhattan, but I'm still a Hayes Rotarian. There are 2 Rotary clubs in Manhattan. I wouldn't be able to attend either one of them, so in choosing one or the other, I simply would make people mad. So it's just easier to continue to be a Hayes Rotarian. And our plans, I think, are still true, is to return to Hayes when our daughter, we moved from Hayes to Manhattan when our youngest daughter decided to be a veterinarian. And that meant 5 more years of school, and meant my wife is home on her own by herself, except on weekends. And she says, "Jerry, I'm moving to Manhattan. Are you coming with me?" So we live in Manhattan. I'm still anxious to return to western Kansas. And our daughter's always been interested in practicing veterinary medicine in her hometown. I am away from Washington, D.C., and I'm using this time. I'm out doing those town hall meetings, and I have a couple in the neighborhood tomorrow. And this afternoon I'm going to spend some time in Liberal. Most of that time will be spent on visiting the high school in Liberal, talking to the students there, and checking in on what's happening in the very southwest corner of Kansas. I thought I'd just mention a couple things and then take the conversation in whatever direction you'd like for it to go. From a Garden City, southwest Kansas perspective, I guess maybe the way to lead into this point is, while there's lots of national issues, lots of international issues, and we see them, hear about them every day, and that's a significant part of my life, my work, but all of us have to deal with those issues. I ask you to give me the chance to represent you in the nation's capital because of a belief that we all do what we can to make sure that rural America, the places that we all call home, are around for a while longer. And so a lot of the focus at every opportunity that we can get away from those huge national and international issues, we're paying attention to those issues that I think are significantly related to the state of Kansas. Just in a broad sense, that's things like agriculture. Whether or not our farmers and ranchers have a shot at success determines a lot about the future of where we all call home. It's about health care. Trying to keep hospital doors open, physicians and other healthcare providers in our communities. In the absence of that, keeping a community together begins to disappear. And of course, Garden City is larger than many of the communities, certainly that I represented as a congressman. But there's lots of places. There's probably not a hospital in Kansas that you could say is doing much better than hanging on by a thread in today's financial circumstances for healthcare. And we know that if we lose our healthcare delivery system, we lose our communities. Young people don't locate, don't raise their families in a place where you can't access health care. Senior citizens, which comprise the population, not of this group, but of many Kansas communities, they are told by their kids. I know in my own circumstance, my hometown is Plainville. My sister and I would have had a conversation with my parents in the absence of a good hospital and a set of doctors. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry, but you really do need to move. And in our case, probably to Hayes, but wherever it would have been, it wouldn't have been home. And so agriculture and healthcare are often at the top of the list. Transportation and infrastructure. Again, connecting where we come from with the rest of the world is important for our future. Small business issues. Trying to make certain that not only is Main Street alive and well, which is a difficult challenge, but trying to assist communities in their economic development, their growth, the Chamber of Commerce and economic development activities. Trying to see that we attract and retain the business community that we have. Technology, related to many of those things we talk about, to our schools, to our economic growth, to our healthcare. Trying to make sure we don't get left behind in the technology revolution. In that regard, broadband has a better chance of being places in Kansas that it's not currently very successful, very prevalent, with an appropriation bill that puts significant amounts of money into programs to assist areas of Kansas and the country that don't have access to broadband. And that's an issue for the Department of Agriculture's Rural Utility Services, their rural development aspect of USDA, and it's part of the FCC mission to provide the necessary resources for those communities. And education. This is a community that understands education, not only K through 12, but our community college here. The efforts that I've learned about that excite me for Southwest Kansas in regard to the center in which we're trying to combine the efforts at Dodge Garden and Liberal to bring the opportunity for greater education here to Southwest Kansas for purposes particularly of medical education, but I can see if we can actually accomplish that can mean educational opportunities that don't currently exist. In regard to just some local things that we're paying attention to try to demonstrate that what I'm saying matters to us. Matt and I've worked together along with a number of Southwest folks in regard to keeping the Southwest Chief alive and well, and we're having some success. The success has been, and I'm happy to talk about this more, it's kind of an interesting story how this issue landed in our lap with the refusal of Amtrak officials to keep their word. But in the process of complaining about that, learning that their plan was to replace train service with bus service from Dodge City to Albuquerque, as if that would be just fine. It would mean the demise of the Southwest Chief. So it's an example of a local issue, and we've had success to date in the sense that Southwest Chief, because of legislative efforts on the part of 6 senators, 2 Democrats from New Mexico, a Republican and Democrat senator from Colorado, and 2 Republican senators from Kansas, 6 of us, 3 and 3, to demonstrate there is some level of bipartisan cooperation in the nation's capital. Have gotten the attention legislatively, we've gotten the attention of the Southwest Chief CEO and his leadership team, and they have committed to keeping the Southwest Chief running as it is with no bus for an additional year. That's the good news. The challenge we face is what does that mean at the end of that year? And it seems to me that Amtrak is interested in walking away from its mission, which is to provide passenger service across the country. And they see the opportunities in the Northeast corridor from Boston to Washington, D.C. as a place they can make money, much more so than what we can do from Chicago to Los Angeles. So we have our work cut out in this regard, but it's an important issue. In regard to transportation, we're working with your community on a request for AIP, Airport Improvement Program funding, in which we want to do some significant improvements to your airport to the tune of about $23 million. And if the grant money, which we've increased the amount of money available by $1 billion for airports across the country. And the good news is, when I say airports across the country, the priority is focused on rural airports, not on big airports. And so we're working to see if we can help accomplish that grant. And the good news for the folks in Garden City and the region is it's a 90-10 split. I guess we're all federal taxpayers, so you can't say that's a perfect win. But the money would be from the airport improvement program, of which 90% would be federal funds, 10% would be local funds. So those are a couple examples of transportation issues here. We failed in regard to getting a highway bill done. My view is that the administration and Congress made a mistake when out of the box the administration puts health care in front of Congress, and the issue of the Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare, that became the first major issue that Congress was asked to deal with. Would have been a smarter decision to start with something that there is broader support and bipartisan agreement, and that would be dealing with infrastructure. And the question that always will arise in infrastructure is, how do you want to pay for it? I'm of the view that we ought to utilize user fees. That's what we have today. You pay excise tax, 18.2 cents a gallon gasoline tax. If I ask for a show of hands, I would guess that few of you would raise your hand saying you want the gas tax raised, but that will be an issue that we will face. And I've had conversations in town hall meetings about this, and if you do the show of hands, it will be the highway contractor and the economic development person and the Chamber of Commerce. They'll raise their hands and say yes. Most people will say no. But if you actually explore this a little bit with constituents, if you could convince them, if they are convinced, maybe that's the way to say it, if they are convinced that the money will be used for roads and bridges and highways and not something else, you can get a lot more hands to go up. The people are willing to invest in infrastructure. And I will tell ourselves as Kansans, when you live and work in the middle of the country, our future is determined by our ability to get goods and commodities, manufactured goods and agriculture commodities, to markets around the globe. And we compete in the global economy. And how efficient we do that determines whether or not we're successful in attaining those markets and keeping those markets. And that has to do with transportation. So there is a reason for our economic well-being for us to invest in transportation. A success that we've had related to the community college is that we have reauthorized the Perkins money. They both begin with P's, and I have to stop and think. Perkins money is the money available for vocational and technical education, available in our high schools and community colleges. We were successful in coming together and reauthorizing that program. I'm of the view that we, depending on what community I'm in, I will say this differently. Sometimes I say we overemphasize something, and sometimes I say we underemphasize something. In Garden City, I would say we underemphasize, and I guess I could get away with saying perhaps we overemphasize university education to the detriment of Kansans when we desperately need technical and vocational skill sets. The growth of this community, the growth of Western Kansas, the growth of rural America will be determined by workforce. And while taxes are important, and we need to be able to be competitive with the surrounding states in what a business faces in locating here or staying here, every effort that I've been involved in over a long period of time of trying to bring or keep a business in Kansas, the number one question is, tell me about your education and tell me about your workforce. Are they motivated and are they trained to fill the jobs? I walk through business plans through manufacturers on an ongoing basis. It is the number one issue that a business person will talk to me about is, we don't have enough, and this is an issue for us in where we are. We don't have enough people to work, and therefore businesses are looking elsewhere. Including, I saw the reports about Wichita, in which the lack of a workforce is delaying the opportunities of businesses who want to expand, particularly in aviation and aerospace, because we need the workforce that doesn't exist sufficiently in our state. We need to promote community college and technical education. In addition to the Perkins money on that topic, we've also extended and added another $100 and made Pell Grants year-round to allow students to be able to go to college in the summer. I often get asked about, student loans and the debt that many students face. Again, we have a veterinarian in the family. I can tell you that, I'll use averages. The average graduate of K-State Veterinary Medical School was $155,000, and the beginning salary is $44,000. Those things don't match very well. A way that we can address this is community college education, and getting our education is never complete, so that's not what I'm suggesting, but getting our tuition condensed into a shorter amount of time. So being able to use a Pell Grant to go to summer school helps us reduce the overall cost of education. Gene, we were always interested in K through 12 education, and from my perspective, education should be mostly state and local. And most of my efforts in Washington, D.C. is to reduce the involvement of the federal government in making decisions about classes and whether or not we're successful assessing our students. No Child Left Behind, in my view, was a terrible, I voted against it, was a terrible intrusion into our schools. Robin, my wife, played the piano at Hayes High School for most of the time we lived there. She would tell me that No Child Left Behind meant there was little focus on art and music. I understand that, she's my wife, I agree with her. I would say that it reduced the focus as well on technical and vocational education because it's not on the test. And decisions that are made here are much better than decisions made in Washington, D.C. about where we want to focus our educational opportunities. We work hard on mandates that really do make sense. In this case, IDEA, special education, trying to make sure that the federal government keeps its commitment to you as taxpayers of Kansas, that we'll provide our percentage share so that Garden City public schools can provide special needs students with special education. Those are just examples of things in which decisions that are made in Washington, D.C. don't make the nightly news, but have a significant consequence on this community. And with the chief here, I would indicate he was a critic, I don't think of me, but a critic, when Garden City lost its DEA office and agent here, Drug Enforcement Agency, and we are close. The decision has been made, has to be run up the chain of command, but a decision has been made to return that office to Garden City and to have a federal presence in southwest Kansas in regard to drugs and alcohol. On this topic, I mean, we're focused a lot upon opioids. If you read the news, Congress is passing legislation about opioids. It is a huge issue. Compelling to me most recently as I visited the hospital in Newton, the thing that they showed me, you could take a United States Senator and walk through any hospital in Kansas, and the hospital administrator could show you the new MRI. They could show you the new CT scan. I've seen many of them. But what Newton wanted to convey to me is the level of drugs and mental health challenges in their emergency room, and I can't imagine it's any different in Garden City or any place else. The police department has created a satellite office in the hospital so that there's police presence in the hospital on an ongoing basis to protect the people who work there, the patients, and other patients, the patients. And it is a result of drugs and alcohol. It's a result of mental health issues. And I'm working to try to find something that Washington, D.C. can do, particularly on the mental health side of things. And these are generally state and local issues that need attention. I just toured the KU Health System Hospital, KU Med Center, what we would call the Med Center in Kansas City, Kansas, to find out about this issue there in the middle of Kansas City, Kansas. Same story, although they have metal detectors to get into the emergency room. They have police officers there, 2 in the emergency room at all times. And the issue is we don't have enough mental health care to try to alleviate the problems that show up in our emergency room. And somebody with mental health issues, an ambulance service or a law enforcement officer, they bring those problems to our hospital and to our emergency room. And we have no place in the absence of a sufficient number of beds, that's again a state issue, at Osawatomie or at Larned. And Kansas decided in the early 90s to downsize the institutional aspect of mental health care and to promote the community aspect of mental health care. Probably not a bad theory, but the money has been inadequate to make certain that people who need institutional care and not in a community is still available. The issue I would raise 2 national issues before the Methodist minister kicks in. One, first of all, I would say in Kansas and to agriculture, but to our economy, we are an export state. What Congress and the President and the administration do in regard to trade will significantly have a consequence on how we earn a living and whether we are successful. And until recently, we've seen a growing, higher stock market price. There's been talk about increasing, well, let me say it differently. There's been unemployment rates have fallen. There's a sense in the country that the economy is growing again. And I think that's true, but what we convey, again, perhaps as a senator who is focused on local and Kansas, what we try to convey all the time to Washington, D.C. is that financial success, that economic boom is not happening in rural America. And part of that, and it certainly will grow worse if we don't get our trade policies right. I remember a Kansas wheat farmer years ago telling me, Jerry, forget the rest of the world, just take care of ourselves. And I understand that sentiment. It's easy to get to that point, forget the world. But in case of a wheat farmer, the question that I could have asked him is, what 48% of your acres, or Kansas acres, do you not want to plant, grow, or harvest? Because we produce more than we can consume. And where we make a living is by selling that elsewhere. This would be a local example of one I've used. We had a governor in Kansas who was opposed to building a coal-fired plant in southwest Kansas. And one of the arguments that she made was, why would we generate electricity in Kansas and sell it to somebody else? The benefits are going out of state. There is not a community in this state, there's not a state who wouldn't wish they could produce something in their community and sell it someplace else and bring the dollars in that sale generates. And that's exactly what we do in agriculture, it's what we do in manufacturing. And the tariff issue, I think we're headed in a good direction in regard to NAFTA. That is a positive development. We've made clear, including a conversation directly with the President, that in my view, we cannot afford to walk away from NAFTA, and it needs to include Canada and Mexico. If we can get a better deal, if we can modify it, so be it, but at the end of the day, and the end of the day can't be very far away, that agreement has to be in place. Mexico is our #1 purchaser of agricultural commodities from Kansas, and Canada is the #1 purchaser of everything from Kansas. I was cutting a ribbon to celebrate the 10,000th fuselage coming off the Spirit Aerosystems Boeing 737 in Wichita as the administration had just announced increasing tariffs on steel and aluminum. That fuselage is 100% aluminum. Again, not just agriculture. Steel and aluminum prices matter to us, and our ability to compete in the global economy and make something here, grow something here, and sell it elsewhere is how we earn a living, and trade matters to us. Nothing wrong with taking China on. They misbehave, they steal our trade secrets, they take our patents. A committee that I chair, we're getting ready to take a look at the implications of all the security things that China does, a chip into your iPhone kind of thing. But this tariff increase after tariff increase is probably not the way to solve that problem. And my suggestion to the President was, let's resolve our differences with Canada and Mexico and the European Union, and then let's all go after China for the way they conduct their business. And again, I think I'm more positive about the scenario that we find ourselves in, and Kansas farmers need to know that NAFTA is in place as we deal with all these other trade and export issues. The other national issue I would mention, and it's a very local issue, is if you can help me help veterans in this community, we're all about that. I'm not a veteran. Hate to admit my age, but I graduated from high school in 1972 as the Vietnam War was coming or had come to an end. I have high school classmates who are a year or two older than me who went to Vietnam. I saw the way they were treated when they returned. I saw the way that many across the country were treated when they returned. And never expecting to be a United States Senator, just as a citizen, as a human being, I remember telling myself as a kid, as a 16-year-old, I'm going to do everything in my life to make up for what I've seen, the way that people who served our country have been treated. And we've taken that to the Senate. I'm a member of the Veterans Committee in the House. I was a member of the Veterans Committee in the House. I'm a member of the Senate. For 2 years, the last 2 years, I've chaired the subcommittee that funds the Department of Veterans Affairs, trying to get them to do their job better. But there is an issue that is, I think, important to communities and to veterans who live in those communities across Kansas. We use the scandal that occurred, particularly in Phoenix, but elsewhere, including here in Kansas, with the fake waiting lists and the allegation that veterans died as a result of being on a list that didn't really matter, didn't result in an appointment or an admission. The VA folks who worked there wanted it to look better. When they had to give their reports, they were pretending patients had an appointment when they didn't. We used that to get more community care. When I was your congressman, not your senator, I represented a congressional district larger than the state of Illinois. Not one VA, there's no VA hospital in the 1st Congressional District of Kansas. So my thought was, how does a 94-year-old World War II veteran in Atwood get to Wichita or Denver? So we pushed the VA to open up clinics. In your world, that would mean Amarillo and Dodge City. But I would say if you're a 94-year-old World War II veteran in Syracuse, how do you get to Dodge City or Amarillo? So it didn't really solve the problem. In fact, when the clinic was opened in Hayes, the VA estimated that 1,200 veterans would access care, routine care in Hayes. Within 6 months, that number was 2,400. The difference being the VA estimated the number of people who live in northwest Kansas that would now stop in Hayes instead of coming on to Wichita for care. What they never accounted for was the other half, the other 1,200, who weren't getting care anyplace. And now Hayes made it possible for them to do so. But those clinics, hard to get to with disabilities or age. And so, and the VA never liked that bill that became law called choice. In my view, they went out of their way to make it difficult for veterans to access. In fact, the VA undersecretary testified in front of our committee, veterans don't want or need this opportunity. I can't imagine there's any truth to that, and if they don't like the opportunity, it's because the VA implemented in a way that they got fed up and said, I'm done trying. So we changed it. I had the honor of working with John McCain for 1.5 years on something that has replaced choice. It's called the John McCain Mission Act. And it changes the criteria and what the law now says. Let me give you an example of the way it worked before I forget that. Hometown Plainville veteran Larry, a Vietnam veteran, calls me and says, Jerry, listen to this. I called the VA in Wichita. I told him, I used to tell people he told me he wanted a colonoscopy. People told me you're telling a lie. There's no one who wants one. So he must have said, I need a colonoscopy. Jerry, I need a colonoscopy. I called the Wichita VA and said, I'd like to have it done here at home. And he said, the gentleman was very polite. He said, sir, I'm sorry you don't qualify. You live within 40 miles of Hayes. The criteria for choice was it took the VA 30 days to provide the service, you could get community care, or if you lived more than 40 miles from a VA facility, you could get community care. And the answer that he was given was, I'm sorry, you don't qualify, you live within 40 miles of Hayes. And he said, but sir, that shouldn't matter, it's fine. I called the VA clinic in Hayes, they don't perform colonoscopies. To which the VA responded, sir, I'm sorry, you live within 40 miles of Hayes. That's the kind of stuff that our veterans have experienced. So we replaced this, one more example. Air Force veteran in Bonner Springs needs a kidney transplant due to toxic exposure. The VA's intention was to send him to Indianapolis, Indiana for his transplant to a VA hospital. He lives 10 miles from the KU transplant center. Could he have the care provided at home? Not according to the VA. We engaged on this. He's now having his transplant performed at KU, close to home, surrounded by family, in a program that he believes is high quality. I should be more definitive, in a program that is high quality, well known, highly regarded. But the VA's first choice was to send him states away for that care and treatment. So we've replaced 30 days and 40 miles with what is in the best interest of the veteran. And we've created 12 criteria to try to make sure the VA implements those standards in a way that doesn't mess this up. We have a secretary at the Department of Veterans Affairs who's all on board in getting this done. And this is an administration of President Trump priority. He campaigned on community care. So I think we're in a better position, but the criteria is what is in the best interest of the veteran. And the reason I spent so much time talking about this is we'd love your help. If there's a veteran who's tried to access care at home, if there's a veteran who hasn't tried but would like to try this now, make sure that you can talk to your VFW, you can talk to your American Legion, they have veteran service officers, but we are willing to roll up our sleeves. I want to prove to the VA that when they say no one wants this program is not needed, that they're wrong. And if they create so many problems that nobody uses it, they'll come back to Congress and say, see, we told you. So help us help veterans. And a side benefit, I mentioned earlier there's not a hospital in Kansas that I don't think is hanging on in a sense by a thread. Just like our schools need every student, our hospitals need every patient. And this is particularly true rural, and incidentally, whether you like it or not, Garden City is rural. Our hospital needs every patient. And so if we can keep our veterans here and the dollars that flow from that care and treatment, then we're stabilizing the healthcare delivery system in our own communities that benefit all the rest of us. There are 250,000 veterans in Kansas. We ought to be taking good care of them, and if they want that service at home, we ought to be providing it, and we could use your help to get it. What would you like to talk about in the 1 minute I have left?
Immigration.
Immigration? Fill me in. Tell me what you want to know.
Well, what is happening right now in Washington?
That's about as broad a question as immigration.
Yes,
but the answer to that question is not enough. So the question was, what's happening in Washington, D.C. in regard to immigration? Our immigration system is broken. Other than veterans, we spend more time as a staff, Reed and crew who work for you, on immigration issues. And what we often discover is there's an immigration application on somebody's desk in Lincoln, Nebraska that's been there for a decade. We need a system in which we need to figure out how we can assimilate. How many people can we assimilate into our economy, into our country? Figure out how we check people's national security and their health, and have a process by which they are allowed to legally come to the country in a matter of weeks or months, not a matter of years or decades. And we are so far from that. Your question about what is happening right now, I would guess the answer, my impression of that answer is very little. My hope is, and I thought this was true at one point in time, and it could come back to be the case, we need to deal with DACA. Congress needs to deal with DACA, and when we do, we could deal with a broader set of immigration issues, not just DACA. We could do, for example, ag workers, both permanent or long-term and short-term. We could deal with high-skilled immigrants. We could deal with STEM education. A problem we've had in dealing with immigration in Washington, D.C. is there are those, in this case, mostly Democrats, so this is not, I'm not intending to be partisan, but this is what we face, who say we want comprehensive, fix all the problems of immigration, or we're not supporting anything else. And while it may be nice to deal with everything, the ability to get 60 votes for everything is pretty limited in the United States Senate. So could we pick out the things that we actually could agree on? I think there's a series, I mentioned some of them, in which we could reach an agreement for 60 senators to vote for something. But the issue of doing everything makes that very difficult to get something done. And I'm of the view that doing something is better than doing nothing. And in Southwest Kansas, I would say that I sometimes get criticized for a belief of support for immigration. Part of what I know about immigration is what I know from representing this part of Kansas for a while, and the value and importance of people who come here to work. You're a community that has received national attention just in the last few weeks in this regard. My town hall meeting in Hodgman County, I thought, demonstrated this pretty well. What the folks in Jetmore at the town hall meeting, we spent most of the hour of the town hall meeting talking about immigration, and their answer to me, their story to me was, Jerry, if somebody wants to come here and work and raise a family and be a part of our community, open arms. They are welcome to come. If they're just coming to get advantages of our hospital and our welfare system and our schools, not so. But we are interested in people coming here, and we would welcome them if they want to work. And sometimes the answer to me, the suggestion to me by some Kansans is, Jerry, if these companies would just pay more money, Americans would take the jobs. I don't think that you would see that as something that's true from your experiences in Southwest Kansas. And we don't raise our kids to do the things that immigrant labor is willing to do in order to get on the ladder of improving themselves and their families' lives. We're at a stage in life in which perhaps we are disadvantaging our children by the idea that we want you to do something that doesn't involve work. I probably don't have the work ethic of my mom and dad, and I want to make sure that my kids have the work ethic of me and my wife. We don't want to diminish this generation to generation. Going back to what I said earlier, there's just not enough people who are here and want to work and have the skill set to do so. Yes, sir.
Follow up on that. What about the card check issue, idea? That is, you have to have a card to show that you're legally in the country in order to work. Where does that stand?
Well,
And wouldn't that solve a lot of the wall issues? I mean, people couldn't come here without a job, so they wouldn't cross the border in the first place.
I mean, I think that all makes sense, and that would be part of an immigration package. There has been concern, some of which I share, about a national ID card, just based upon privacy and big government, 1984 and George Orwell. But man, I don't know what privacy we have left. I mean, we're so far down this line of people and entities knowing about us. It's hard to say this is the privacy issue, is a card that says that we're here, that a person is here under legal circumstances. So that would be a part of a immigration package if and when we get to that point. What am I missing on this topic? It's good to have.
The accessibility of offices, immigration offices.
Yes, ma'am. Not only do we need a DEA office in Garden City, we need an immigration office, and we add those services here. Those services were here because we struck a deal with whoever was the administration at the time when I was in the House to say, if you want my vote on X, we're going to have an immigration office in Southwest Kansas. And it was here and lasted a while, and I need to find the leverage again to get it back.
But a little more on DACA, where are we at on that?
Cecil's question was a little more on DACA. DACA, I think, there were, I thought we were close to a DACA fix. And the standards of what the administration would agree to changed during the negotiations. And it became difficult and I think there were many, particularly House members, who did not want to vote for a DACA program if the president was going to veto it. And so what we need is a clear understanding of what the president and his administration would support in regard to DACA and what else that would include. And I guess what I would say is that what happens in the elections on this topic, what happens 3 weeks from today? Although I guess that's the wrong way of saying it. I think you can start voting tomorrow. Is that true, Gene? You would know. I think I can go to the courthouse. I'm not home on election day, so I think I can go to the courthouse tomorrow and vote. Soon, all right.
The 24th.
24th. I can't go tomorrow. Week from, maybe it's a week. That's what I always say, Gene. You'll do well in politics. When someone asks me, when is that going to happen? I'll say, soon. When somebody asks me what the chances are of something happening, I'll say 50-50. Use that one. You're welcome.
I've got a lot of students that I've helped through college that probably need that.
Though I think that's Cecil's saying, and it's true, I would compliment Cecil on his efforts to help, particularly people here in Garden City, to get on that ladder of upward mobility. And this is an area in which I think, in a broad sense, not everyone, but in the public opinion of an immigration issue, this is one, DACA is one in which you can find consensus. Most people see this as a worthwhile, something that is appropriate to do, despite all the differences we may have in regard to other issues related to immigration. Kind of the no fault of their own and citizens of significant importance to our community. Before anybody asks any more difficult questions, the Methodist minister would say, you spoke a minute after you all didn't walk out, you were nicer than the Concordia Rotary Club. Before I conclude, Mr. President, I just want to thank you for welcoming Reed to your club and to your community. We've worked to make certain we have a presence in Southwest Kansas for as long as I've been elected to represent you, but I think we've taken our position to a new all-time high, and I would encourage you to utilize Reed as my eyes and ears in my absence, and I appreciate him very much in getting involved in this community and others across Southwest Kansas. This is a place that's worthy of, in many ways Kansans are alike, but there's some unique distinctions about Southwest Kansas that deserve our attention, and put Reed to work in that regard, and we're delighted to have him as part of our team. Thank you very much for allowing me to join.